All right, hopefully this thing is on. Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Let me just see if I can get the chat window up here. All right, excellent. I think we're good to go. So, been a hell of a day for news. I announce I'm doing a live stream, and then we get some interesting news here about some interesting political steps. Looks like Pierre is in the running, so that's going to be an interesting election now. Uh, Somebody was asking me if I'd have a scotch. Right now, I've got myself something else, but all right, so let's talk about GoFundMe. And I'm going to start out here and just say I'm not taking a real side in this other than just to say I support the heck out of people having freedoms. Charter of Rights and Freedoms provides for freedom of expression, and freedom of expression includes the freedom to protest. And as a general rule, if you're running a protest and everyone thinks you're doing great and um, everybody thinks that your protest is being really nicely run and real polite, then you are probably doing it wrong. That is not really what protest is about. Protest is about being inconvenient. Protest is about being difficult. Protest is about, in some cases, being obnoxious. And there are always limits to that. Protest, your freedom of expression never includes outright violence. So, actual violent acts are not included in the freedom of expression. So you can't say, hey, listen, my protest was punching a guy in the face. That would not be included within your scope of freedom of expression. But short of that, everything is within expression and can only be limited, subject to reasonable limits. And reasonable people are going to disagree about where that is, but that's ultimately a matter for the courts. And so what we've got right now is a protest that is pissing a lot of people off. And it's fairly clear why. This is a very controversial issue. I can tell you earlier today, I released a video talking about juror vaccination, and I got a whole bunch of people unsubscribing. And so that is, I kind of knew that would happen, but that is just one of the risks here. Whenever something is controversial, you don't have to agree with what's going on with what the truckers want to say, hey, listen, I support their right of freedom of expression. But of course, as noted, some of the things that have been alleged, and I say alleged because I haven't seen any video or anything like this, but if you're getting into a fight with a homeless person, they could charge you for that. If you're blocking a hospital, they could probably charge you for that. But just in terms of, one of the big things here is just that they're being real noisy and real loud. And that's, its own separate kind of concern here. Now, what's one of the tactics that's been taken here is trying to shut down their funding. And that is via primarily, just to backtrack a little here. So GoFundMe, they had raised an incredible amount of money. That was, what is it? Some estimates say 10 million, some say 9, some say 8, but lots of money there. And now GoFundMe has said that they are not going to be distributing this to, over to the organizers anymore. And I'll just stop here and read a couple of super chats. Hey, Hafty Sazard. And he said, hey, oh crap, it just dropped off there. Sorry, but appreciate that. And Squeak von Mosenmeyer said a video detailing the merits of the Brian Peckford et al. In Canada case would be fantastic. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm going to have to do some research on that one. But yes, that'll probably happen. So yes, GoFundMe was facing a ton of political pressure and said, okay, we're no longer going to be involved because they're fundraising through us. And again, huge amounts of money. I posted a joke on Twitter, saying, hey, I wouldn't mind that money because that's, 9 million, 10 million, whatever it is. That's a huge amount of cash. And so they faced pressures saying, "Hey, listen, aren't you guys enabling this? Aren't you, you know, aren't you involved somehow?" So GoFundMe said, "Listen, we're not gonna, we're out." Now, here's where things get a little sketchy. GoFundMe makes several mistakes in this that I think are big problems. And the first one, I want to give a bit of a shout out to Richard Hogue here because he's the one who first went through the GoFundMe terms of service in order to spot this problem. And so, what they did initially, what they said they were going to do initially, is take all of this money, millions of dollars, and say, listen, if you are a donor, you can make an application within, I think it was February 15th, they said, to ask for a refund. And I don't think that they guaranteed that you would actually get a refund, but you could submit some sort of application. And they said, otherwise, we're going to give it to charities we approve of. And that is a hell of a thing because, as I mentioned, Richard Hogue went through their terms of service and he found that they did not actually have a clause that allowed them to redistribute the money in that fashion, which becomes a problem because if they're not acting under their terms of service, if they're not acting under their agreement, then they are potentially engaged in, conversion or theft of that money in some fashion. And that would have been a really big deal. So, and there were people looking at investigations on this, and so GoFundMe backed away from that. And that was the right move on GoFundMe's part. What they've said is we're going to automatically refund all of this money. So they avoided that problem. But they haven't avoided all of the problems because there's another really big one that's come up here. And I see a super chat. Thank you, Stephen Elliott, for the $5. Can you please do a show on the legality of a dedicated secure gun room for restricted guns on display storage? That I think I can do in the future, so I'll add that to my list here. Now, the issue here, and this is just I want to see if I can bring this up. You'll have to forgive me if it takes me a little bit of effort here to get this up. Sorry. I thought I had this up all ready to go, and turns out that I don't. Give me 1 second. Just trying to find this in my tweets here. They've really caused themselves some trouble, in my view, and I just want to show you guys why. All right, can I bring this up? Will it be visible? All right, let's see. I don't know if you guys can see this at all. Let me know in the chat. Oh wait, I'm just going to be showing you the the chat there instead. So this is Jim Watson, who is the mayor of Ottawa, and what he says here is, I want to sincerely thank the team at GoFundMe for listening to the plea made by the city and the Ottawa police to no longer provide funds to the convoy organizers. And he also adds, in light of the unlawful behavior that has transpired in the last few days, they have come to the right decision in support of our city and our residents. These protesters have been holding our city hostage for a week now, and I'm hopeful that limiting their access to funding and resources will restrict their ability to remain in Ottawa. I'm imploring similar crowdfunding platforms to take the same position and not enable the group in its fundraising efforts, which would deal a blow to our efforts to put an end to this occupation. All right, so you might be wondering why this is a big deal, aside from the mayor of Ottawa being kind of a jerk there. And one of the critical issues here is that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not apply to it doesn't apply to everybody. It in fact only applies to the government. So what I mean by that is that, like, you or I can't actually be, there's no way to charge somebody for violating somebody's charter rights and freedoms, an individual or even a company. YouTube is not required to respect freedom of expression. They're not a charter actor in that sense. It's only the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was created as a restriction on the government specifically and only. So the what is it? The issue that we've got there is that you know we have GoFundMe acting in a capacity that is kind of similar in some ways to the government, but not they wouldn't normally be covered by that. Now there is an exception to this, and that exception is really kind of important to understand. And to explain this, I'll give you a little bit of an analogy. So let's say you go to the hospital because you were driving, you get into an accident, you hit your head, you need an MRI. And so you go into the hospital, and the hospital, while they're there, decides that they're going to take a blood test. If that's the hospital's own doing, then you wouldn't actually have a charter claim against the hospital. That's just them doing hospital business. But let's say it's not. Let's say that a police officer saw you crash and is real curious about whether or not you were drinking and driving. Now, this officer doesn't have enough grounds to make a demand for your blood sample at this point. But let's say he goes into the hospital and says to, the nurses or the doctor there and says, I'd really like it if you could take a blood sample. They go, well, dude hit his head. Like, we don't need his blood. We don't, that's not something we need. We're not vampires. We're not going to take blood for nothing. So, yeah, there's no point. But he says, no, listen, I'm worried this guy might have been drinking and driving. Please take a blood sample so that I can, complete an investigation and make this into a criminal charge. So then the hospital takes that blood sample. Again, normally you wouldn't have a charter claim against the hospital, or you wouldn't have a charter claim about that action. But that changes a bit once the government actually steps in and asks a company or an organization or something to act on their behalf. And that's what this tweet really opens the door to, is the question of whether or not GoFundMe was acting as a government actor here. And that's just to, in the sense of, we want to shut this protest down, and so we want you to seize this money. And so this actually raises questions as to whether GoFundMe's actions might end up being a government limitation on first a Section 8 violation, a seizure, as well as limitations on, freedom of expression. So this creates all sorts of really interesting possibilities as to what's going on here. And quite frankly, maybe there should have been a little bit more of a discussion going on before that tweet was posted. I think that that's a tweet that maybe they're going to come to regret, because seizing $9 million is a hell of a seizure. And I don't know that that's actually, that's actually justified. So there may actually at some point down the road be a claim, and I'm not sure, who would be against and so forth, but there may be a claim for that $9 million to say, hey, we want that money. Now, one thing that seems like it might happen, and I'm not a civil lawyer, so I'm just kind of, talking out my ear here, but it might be really interesting, because right now all of these truckers are being sued, and they're being sued under what's called public nuisance, which is basically that they're preventing people from enjoying their property because they're too loud, too much honk. And so if that suit is successful, and I don't know if it will be or won't be, because again, I'm not a civil lawyer. I don't know. I haven't done public nuisance claims. It's just not something that happens in my profession. But it'd be really entertaining if they end up wanting to pursue GoFundMe, because if they win the public nuisance claim and want the money, well, then they might be actually kind of ticked that GoFundMe didn't take or didn't provide the money, and then they'd say, hey, why couldn't we? We want that money now. So all of that is, it's interesting, but I think that this is a kind of concerning aspect here in terms of what we're looking at for freedom of expression, because of this tactic of shutting down um, shutting it down by taking away their money. It's a real worrying tactic. And I always make this point and I say, listen, you don't have to agree with this protest. You can just think of what happens when you're protesting next. Because, I've got my own views on things. I like guns. You know, I like all sorts of things. I like guns. I like leather work. I like whatever else. But, you know, you might be coming at things from a very different perspective. And so you might be, the next time there's a protest that you support, all of these tactics are now potentially on the table. And that is a real concern. People are probably wondering what I'm drinking here. This is Clamato and Modelo. And yeah, it is, it's probably a semi Michelada here. All right, I'll just read a couple of super chats. Milan Vrekic said, on one side, people fighting for their freedom and livelihood. On the other, inconvenienced elite. Donate to the new campaign on Give, Send, Go. And I've got a sticker from Captain Electron saying, you are amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this protests are always a difficult and contentious scenario. And somebody's asking, is it a Michelada? It's close enough. I don't know if I've got it right, but it's my take on one, and they're tasty. But protests are always going to be contentious. As I said, if you have a protest and everybody thinks it's a good idea, it's probably a pretty crappy protest. If you have a protest that doesn't bother anybody, oh well. Now there's the other thing I'll say here is if you're against this protest and you want to go out and counter protest, fill your boots. Like, I got no problem with people going and counter protesting. I got no problem with people expressing, their dislike of it. There's people saying all sorts of crap on Twitter, and that is absolutely their right as well. Freedom of expression cuts both ways. If you want to go on Twitter and say, hey, Runkle's an idiot, and, don't watch Runkle, that's entirely within your rights. You've got, I'm not going to agree with every protester out there, and so, yeah. But, if you are somebody who doesn't like this, think about the next time there's a Black Lives Matter or other policing issue protest. Think about the next time there are indigenous protesters saying we want to protect water rights. We want to protect our land, whatever it is. Whatever the issue is, I mean, protests are always going to be noisy. I used to work next to the legislature building, and there was almost always a protest there, every month. We'd see at least one protest there. And they'd be shouting and so forth, and it would be annoying while I'm trying to work. Absolutely, it would be annoying. But you move on, right? I didn't ever say, hey, I want these guys roasted by the cops or anything like that. I might have said, hey, I wish they'll go away, but that's just my own personal feelings. That's its own thing. Anyway, the other thing I sort of wanted to talk about here is Kotanko. And Kotanko is an interesting thing. Now, I'm trying to get a copy of the information to obtain. And what this is, what that document is it's the basically the grounds that the police were using in order to get a search warrant. Now, if you're not familiar with the Roger Kotanko scenario, what happened here is that they actually... So this Roger Kotanko was a very skilled gunsmith. His pieces sold for, I think it was something like $7,000 for a handgun. If it's a Roger Kotanko custom. And I mean, that's a lot of money. I don't own a $7,000 handgun, and I mean, I might like to one day, but I certainly don't right now. And so that's, what his profession was, and he was recognized by lots of people as being a paragon of his trade, really skilled. I understand that his customers included not just sport shooters and target shooters, but they also included people, like police and various other people who just want to have a really good functioning gun. Now, the Toronto police drove out, and it was a couple of hours away from Toronto, but they drove out to execute a warrant on him. And in the course of executing that warrant, he was shot and killed. And I mean, lots of people are upset by this. I'm upset by this. And, people are asking, why did Mr. Kotenko die? There's a couple of really big issues in here. And one of the ones here is, why do we have the police driving 2 hours out there to execute this warrant? Did they not think that the local police could do it? Why did they let him go back and, enter his garage? Because what I've seen in a lot of cases where they're looking at at police enforcement is that they will say firearm owners. What they'll sometimes do is they'll try to catch the person outside of their house, right? They'll say, this guy's got a lot of guns. We're going to wait until he gets into his car and arrest him there. And then that way we don't have to, there's less risk that this is going to turn into a shootout versus if he's in his house. So they didn't do that. They instead let this guy who's a gunsmith go into his garage, into his workshop where there's a high risk of firearms being present. There's also this talk about this mystery customer who was there during this raid. And, who is this mystery customer? Well, I'm sorry, but there's just no way that mystery customer was anybody but an undercover officer. There's just no way around that. And I'll just take a second here, just because I saw a comment in the chat. I'll read a couple of super chats and then I'll address something here. So somebody, Ryan432 says protests are a foreseeable risk associated with living in the national seat of government. Just my 2 cents. I agree. I mean, if you live close to the Parliament building or a legislature building, you will absolutely, that is a risk. You may have people, protesting, and again, that is their right. Jimbo Toast has noted GoFundMe has an arbitration clause and a class action waiver. If everyone involved files for arbitration, GoFundMe will have to pay insane arbitration costs. Look up Owen Benjamin and Patreon. And that is a tactic people have used in the past. I don't know. I haven't looked at their arbitration clause myself, so I can't comment on that beyond that. Somebody had said that it is illegal to own bulletproof vests or stab vests in Canada. I don't think so. I don't actually know if I can bring a vest on stream. I don't know if that's against YouTube's rules, but there's one right there. Just, I'm pointing at it. Here in Alberta, you can have one so long as you have a firearms license. And so it's right there. Quite literally, it's a level 3 soft armor with level 4 plates. So I kind of feel comfortable enough saying that you can have them, because I wouldn't tell you that I had it, and I wouldn't have it if it wasn't legal. I'm a lawyer. I've got to be super on the up and up as to what I do. Boggy Creek Films says, really appreciate how you interpret Canadian laws in a way that makes sense for the average person. Keep up the great work. Thank you. That's really what I try to do. It's really, I think that we need to make the law more accessible to the average person because, quite frankly, it's difficult, but everybody's expected to navigate the law. And so if lawyers are not making the law accessible and understandable to the ordinary person, it's a real problem. Hafty Sazard says, monetary contributions and protected expression. Has the Ottawa PD implicated themselves in a charter violation with their involvement in GoFundMe? I think quite possibly, because when they're telling GoFundMe that they can't do this, and it's specifically to shut down a protest, that's a real big problem. Now, I will note, I see people commenting on the body armor aspect. You got to check, because this is not covered by any federal legislation. It's covered by various provincial legislation. And so in some provinces you can have it, in some provinces you can't. The rule here in Alberta, as noted, is that if you have a firearms license, you can have body armor. There's somebody asking me about serial numbers being recreated, and I'm gonna get to that. So that one I will answer, but in good time. So now I don't have the information to obtain at this point, but uh, I have seen news reports about what's in it, and I have had the opportunity to speak to some of the people who have the information to obtain. I'm still working on getting that so that I can do a more proper commentary about it. And so that'll come. I just don't know when that'll be. One of the reasons why people are reluctant to sort of share a copy with me is that there's currently a court application going on. They want to redact the names of some officers out there. And quite frankly, I don't care about those officers' names. I'm not gonna, that's not what I'm really planning on sharing here, but I just want to talk about what happened. Because the police theory of this is really hinky. And uh, so here's what the police basically say. They did a raid and they seized somebody's they seized a pistol and a long gun, and those each had an obliterated serial number, and they took steps to recreate that serial number. Now, I don't know how much detail I should get into here in terms of how they do it, but the police have various tactics and methods for recreating a serial number that has been obliterated. Because when you think about it, metal is kind of a soft material in some ways. It's, you may not think of it as soft, but, you can make an impression in metal. If you think of like a sheet of tinfoil, that's easy enough. You can just carve in it with your finger, but a thicker block of steel, you can make an impression with, say, a stamp, with hydraulics and so forth. Now, or you can engrave and whatever else. Now, however you do that, it's going to disrupt the surface of the metal. And that disruption actually goes below the surface and into the subsurface. So what happens is people take a Dremel or something like that and they obliterate the serial number, but that underneath, like that change in the texture of it, allows them to recover it. And people have noted in the chat that acids are used. That's one set of techniques. There are other methods that they will use in order to sort of discover what those serial numbers are. So in this case, these serial numbers were obliterated, and they were obliterated with a milling machine, which the police said was odd. They say usually they see somebody doing this with a file or something like that, and that it's unusual that somebody would use a milling machine. They apparently described this as professional removal. And so they took those steps to recover it, and each of these serial numbers had an RKC for Roger Kotenko Customs. And they went, oh, well, who's going to have an incentive to take off a serial number? Well, only Mr. Kotanko would have that. Now, here's the problem that we have with this. Actually, maybe a couple more super chats came in, and then I'll sort of go on my rant a little further here. Maria Giuseppe says, do you have spicy V8 juice in Canada? Mix that with your ale or lager. You'll thank me. It's lovely. We have a sort of spicy V8, or we have Clamato. I tried the spicy V8 juice when I was in Utah. It was actually on the way back from shooting Desert Brutality. I stopped at a gas station to just recover, and I saw that spicy V8, and I picked it up, and it was actually really good, and I haven't been able to find it here in Edmonton. So if you live in Edmonton and you know where I can get spicy V8 juice, let me know. I'd really like to know that. Also, $10 from Chad Haggerty, who says, nothing of value to say. Just want to send support and say hello. Lol. And if you guys don't know, Chad is a friend of mine. He's a lawyer in Calgary. He does excellent work. His webpage is Chadvocacy. If you Google that, you should get his page. As I said, lawyer in Calgary, does excellent work. If you're in Calgary and you are facing criminal charges, he's a good name to call. Also, Greg Dunn down there is another guy who is solid. So yeah, Cartoon Foxes says any chance of getting Andrew Branca on? Andrew's a great guy. I love his stuff. I will absolutely at some point see about bringing him on. I'm still learning about this whole live streaming thing. It's still kind of new to me, and but yeah, there are a lot of things. One aspect is that he's an American self-defense expert, and while a lot of that carries over to Canada, and I think he gives excellent advice, the law is a little different. So anyway, as I was saying about the police theory here. So their theory is that he's bringing these guns in, engraving them with a serial number, and then carving his serial number off. Now, from what I understand, these frames he was bringing in are Norinco frames. And, Norinco doesn't always have the best reputation, but they have good metal. He just, was spending time polishing it up, making sure um, the metal is fine. The machining is not always the best. So he would go over that and, make sure it's a really top-notch gun before it went out. But he's importing these things, and when they come in, they're either going to have a different serial number on them, a Norinco serial number. But my understanding is that in a lot of cases, he was importing these unserialized. So they're showing up in Canada with no serial number on them whatsoever. So the police theory of this really makes no sense to me, because what you have is this gunsmith. And you know what? I've heard a lot of things about Mr. Kotanko. I've heard that he is a family man. I've heard that he's a big teddy bear, one of the nicest people that you could ever hope to meet. I have heard that he is an excellent gun, or was, I suppose, an excellent gunsmith. But I've never heard anybody say that he's a complete moron. And it seems to me that you would have to be a complete moron to bring in an unserialized gun, carve your specific unique serial number into it, and then mill it off. Like, why would you actually take the step to sign the gun? Because, when he's putting RKC on it, it's basically a signature. Why would he take that unique step of signing the gun before before milling it off again and sending it out? And the other thing is, let's consider a little bit the market for criminals buying guns. Criminals do pay a premium for firearms over the sort of market price, but they're not paying $7,000 for a handgun. If they're gonna spend, maybe, they might spend, say, $2,000 for this Norinco handgun, but they're not going to spend $7,000. It makes no sense to me. Why would he take this gun and say, I want to lose some money on this one? I really think that, I could sell this for $7,000, but instead I'm going to sell it for It makes no sense whatsoever. And apparently they wanted to get a hold of his, sorry, I got an eyelash in my eye here, so I keep rubbing it. So apparently one of the things they wanted to get a hold of is his logbook to see what was going on that, because he's a business owner, right? And as a firearms business owner, he's got to keep a whole lot of detailed records. But the thing is, they can just ask for that. Like, they actually have a right to demand that he provides that. So, like, what? This makes no sense to me. And I'm really hoping that Mr. Kotanko was not killed on the basis of a police theory that they didn't run past a 5-year-old. Like, if this guy's master plan is engrave your serial number and then wipe it, why wouldn't he just import a couple that didn't have the serial number on them in the first place? Why wouldn't he just engrave some other dude's serial number on it? Like, just some random numbers on it. Like, so, yeah, I mean, this would be hilarious if there wasn't a dead man at the end of all of this. And I mean, I'm at a loss. I'm just at a loss as to, what happened here. I want to, as I said, I want to get the full information to obtain to go over this. Maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe, like, I always want to be careful when I'm making a video and just make sure that I've got all my I's dotted and T's crossed. Maybe there's something in there that covers this, but I mean, there's some other aspects to this, and I'll just read a quick super chat here. Jason Kwashnik, sorry if I got that wrong, says, thanks for all your information and explaining the law. Keep it up. Thank you, Jason. So there's some other aspects here. I mean, if if Mr. Kotanko is a skilled machinist, and he absolutely sounds like he's a skilled machinist, then why would you want to, or why would he risk this? Because he would absolutely know that it's really difficult to get a serial number out of a gun in a way that can't be recovered. In fact, to do so, you pretty much have to machine so deep in the gun that the gun's not going to function anymore. You just can't really do it. Serial number recovery is really good. They're really quite skilled at this. He'd know that. Like, he'd know it's not worth the risk. And, so that makes no sense. Like, how would this guy suddenly forget that he's a machinist and forget this knowledge? Yeah, I don't understand it at all. It seems to me that it's much more likely that this was sold to somebody and then lost or something like that, or stolen, and that somebody then carved that serial number out, not because they wanted to, to protect Mr. Kotenko, but in fact that what they were trying to do is, is just cover up where they personally got it. Like, oh, well, now they can't trace this handgun back to that break and enter. But, yeah. Somebody was asking, how do they even get a search warrant for a place 2 hours from Toronto? I'm not sure. They might have actually been asked, or, I mean, Toronto is going to have a better tactical team than, someplace 2 hours out. So it might be that they were asked to bring the big boys, bring the guys who've got the, the tank, and the guys who get some minimal training and so forth. Somebody's asking, did he have any employees? That I don't know. But this whole thing kind of smells. And I know a lot of people are saying, a lot of people on this really want to reach towards conspiracy and say, this was some sort of targeted hit or something along those lines. I don't think so. I don't think that that's what's going on here. And the reason why I say that is because I see a lot of criminal files. I see a lot of police doing things, and quite frankly, when you watch something like CSI or Law and Order, and you see these super competent police officers who always get their their person, they don't. It's not really an accurate reflection. Police are doing their best, but they're not necessarily, Law and Order, you'll see the police working on a file, and they've got one file, and they're all spending weeks on it. They don't actually have that kind of time. They don't have that kind of effort, and, they're actually working on hundreds or thousands of files. And Jason, I'm not actually sure. Give me a second. I can look up what I'm up to, but toss me an email. We can chat about that if you're serious. Yeah, it's really difficult to tell here, but I think this is just incompetence. I actually honestly think that what probably happened is somebody came up with this theory. They didn't think it through, and yeah. So people have asked me, what do we do to prevent this from happening in future? And thank you, Jane Babe and Luxor, $75 super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So one of the things I would love to see here is that I would love to see that the police planned use of force. And I say planned because sometimes shit goes weird, right? If the police plan that they're going to send 4 guys to, execute a search, and it turns out that somebody shoots at them and they end up calling in, everybody who's nearby and, going in full force, then that's, things have gone off plan. But their planned use of force should have to be detailed um, in the warrant. They should have to say when they're making their warrant application, we plan to use the following force. We plan to have 16 guys. We plan to have them there with AR-15s. We plan to have them there with the tank. And we plan to kick down the front door. And, and this is why this is necessary. That should be part of the warrant application. And if they don't provide sufficient justification for why they want to use that level of force, the justice of the peace should have the authority to say, no, I don't approve of this level of force. Either scale it down and send me a new application with that, or provide more justification. Why is this person that scary? And, why would they need it? So, just tossing that out there. I mean, there's been discussion, and I'll just quickly address potentially criminal says police do their best but still screw up, like the guy making your cheeseburger. Exactly. It's and thank you for the $5 super chat, but yeah, it's police are doing their best, and sometimes your best isn't good enough. Lawyers screw up. All sorts of people screw up. It just is what it is. But I think that, having this as a necessary step of the police having to actually justify the force that they're planning to use would be a fantastic improvement. And I also think that warrants are sometimes signed too easily and too lightly. I think that we need to consider that, every time a warrant is signed to search a place, that there's the possibility that somebody gets killed. And we need to keep that in mind, and that needs to be a consideration. I find that the justice system, as a general overall principle, doesn't really consider the impact of a lot of this stuff on people. Most people have never seen a search and or seen how stressful it is. Most people have never spent a day in jail, and certainly have never spent a week in jail or something along those lines. And so you'll see people say, oh, well, it's not such a big deal. He can speak to bail in a week. This is very common in Ontario. Out here in Alberta, people tend to get bail hearings very quickly and expeditiously. But in some provinces like Ontario, you can expect, even on fairly minor charges, to spend some time in custody. We need to consider what that does to a person, because for the average person, that's a really big deal. Thank you, Frank Merkel, for the $5 super chat here. The average person who, doesn't have a job that's going to be waiting for them if you are held in custody for a week, and especially not if your reason for being held in custody is that you are, or that you're not there for a week, is that you're held in jail. If you call up your boss and say, I can't make it for the next week, I'm in a cell, they're going to say, okay, that's cool. We're going to fire you, we're going to fire you and get somebody else. So these are considerations that I think we need to, to consider a little bit more. And especially these things tend to weigh most on people who are not like me, less comfortable. I live a fairly comfortable life. I'm sitting here, in my little home office. I can afford to have a beer when I want to. I can, so forth. Somebody's saying my light is too bright. Let's see if I can tone that down. Thank you, Jay, for the $5 super chat. Let me know if that has changed things or improved things. So yeah, I think that, if you've got an office job, you're probably better able to survive a week that you just can't make it, an emergency leave or something like that. But yeah, that's its own separate rant. Somebody asked me if they think GoFundMe shot their business in the foot. Well, I mean, just think about it. What is GoFundMe promising to do? What is it, the fundamental promise that they make? So, I mean, what it basically comes down to is you give them money so that that money will make it to someone else. And, a specific someone else, not some random charity that GoFundMe has approved. You actually want it to be, if I'm doing a GoFundMe for, help support so and so with cancer, I want to know what's getting to the cancer kit. That's why I'm going to the GoFundMe page and not just like throwing my money out the front window. I want it to get to where it's going. Now, if you can't actually expect that they're going to do what they're promising to do, that is ultimately what they're promising to do, is to get the money to its destination, then why? It's a bit of a concern there. So I'll have some concerns about using GoFundMe in the future. And yes, I see people noting that it's going back to the people automatically. That is probably because they were really worried about what was going to happen if they decided to give it to a charity. There was going to be some real serious legal questions about that. And so, I mean, that was a very good idea that they avoided doing that. And yeah. And if you're watching and if you're enjoying this, hit the like button. But yeah, I think that they've blundered. I mean, if they want to stay out of controversy, I mean, they also have a right as to who they want to associate with. GoFundMe has the right to say, listen, we're not going to do business with you. But ultimately, they should do that before they take the money, I think. That's just my kind of thought on that. Um, I'd have a lot. I think people would have a lot less concern with GoFundMe if they said, listen, we're not going to take any further donations. But yeah. And I mean, I should say there's some people out there who are super thrilled that GoFundMe is pulling this. That's ultimately, and my personal feelings about GoFundMe getting the money to whoever, I agree with that, even if it's to people I disagree with. It's whoever it's going to. One thing that's actually coming up more and more here is GoFundMe and these kinds of crowdsourcing things funding litigation. And so we see this in the Rittenhouse trial, where Kyle Rittenhouse, who, he's been cleared. He is, he's cleared. And now, but lots of people were upset. And so they, as I recall, they were like, no, we're not going to do this. But we're seeing more and more people who have been charged looking to use GoFundMe and other these kinds of crowdfunding measures as a way to assist that. I've donated through various services to to help various people sort of through difficulties. One gun range, and I'm blanking on the name because hey, it's late and it's been a long day today. But the they were saying we're locked in a battle with the chief firearms officer. Please help fund this. And so they were running a GoFundMe or some similar campaign, and I contributed to that. So yeah. Marcel Dufour is asking, odd question, can I Albertan own and attach a bayonet on my rifles? There's not really any legislation that says you can't put a bayonet on your rifles. Although who knows what Trudeau's going to do next. It's, I mean, the bayonet thing that we see in the States where they're like, oh, you can't have a bayonet lug or whatever else, is an example of one of the dumbest kinds of restrictions, because ultimately, they ban cosmetic features, but nobody actually, who cares? Like, who cares if a gun has a bayonet on it? if the most dangerous thing about the gun is that it's pointy at the end, well, I mean, holy shit. That's that's kind of a surprising element, I guess. But yeah, I've got an SKS. It's got a bayonet on it. No issues with that. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't really know what to make of all of this. I do also respect that we have a right to freedom of association, and freedom of association is also a freedom not to associate. So your freedom is often to say, listen, I don't want to be with these people. I don't want to be in a group with them. I don't want to be standing next to them and so forth. Um, Somebody was saying can't hunt in Alberta with a bayonet. I would have to actually look that up. I don't know offhand. Somebody's asking, do I like the SKS? I do. I enjoy the SKS. It's a great gun. I mean, it's inexpensive. You get what you pay for on it, and you're never gonna put an optic on it, or at least not without mangling the thing. But I mean, it's just a great way to go and have fun. And it's also a gun that is a little bit bigger than a 22 that you can bring somebody out to the range and just say, go ham. Like, hey, you're new to this. Go have some fun. Put some holes in some paper downrange and go nuts. Uh, Somebody said a non-Norinco SKS, I hope. Original Soviet issue, durable as heck, and yeah. So somebody says, any of you chance of you coming back to Twitch? Yes, I'm just often so busy that it's hard for me to. One of the things about Twitch is that you really have to dedicate some time to it, and to say I'm going to play a game for 2 hours, and during that 2 hours, I'm just going to play a game, and that's tough for me because both I have attention deficit, so I'm often skipping back and forth, but also just I got so much crap to do that sometimes it is difficult. Yeah. Somebody asked if I've ever shot a PS90. I have not. I did get to shoot some full auto in the States. I did not put. I didn't put that in my video about Desert Brutality just because YouTube has opinions about full auto. But I I really enjoyed that, and yeah. Uh, Somebody said Runkle confirmed member of the Red Army. Nah, I like guns from all sorts of things. I own a Luger, and somebody gave me crap about going, why would you own a Luger? That's a Nazi gun. I'm like, yeah, but it commemorates that somebody somewhere shot a Nazi in the face and took his gun, which is a thing that is worth commemorating. That is, yeah. Somebody was asking what kind of games I'm playing. You can see the hair. People make the elf joke, and they also make the joke about The Witcher. So I've been playing The Witcher 3. I haven't got very far into it, but I'm going to keep going with it. Tom Ference, or I hope I'm getting that right. It's off topic, but can you do a video on exactly what part of the gun has become prohibited by the Order in Council? What part do they want you to surrender? The receiver. I can do a video on that. It's a bit complicated. In theory, they want the entire gun, but if the gun is dismantled, then they want the receiver, which is the lower. However, for an AR-15, they've also banned the upper. So they've also banned that as a prohibited device. And so for the AR-15, they're going to want both the AR or the upper and the lower. Somebody's asking if I've read the Witcher books. I have not. I'm told they're good, but I haven't. And yeah, I'm gonna go back to Twitch and try to play all of it. I haven't. What is it? One of these days, I'm gonna sort of grind out achieving, whatever it is, partner status with Twitch to potentially monetize. But I mean, Twitch for me isn't really a primary thing. It's mostly a screwing around kind of thing. Somebody was saying, have I talked about Kotanko? I did speak about Kotenko a bit. I mean, it's ultimately, I guess my rant on that is that their plan makes no sense, their notion on it, but check it out. This video should be available for rewatching later on. So, yeah. Somebody's asking, what are my thoughts on a digital Bill of Rights and /or treating big tech as the modern public square. And I mean, this one's kind of a wrinkle, right? Because we've got a bit of a problem here in that when they said like the government can't restrict freedom of speech, at the time, the only thing that they could really contemplate is that the government would be the only people of sort of able to regulate freedom of speech. That no other, if you're the local, if you make, you're the local cobbler, you're making shoes, and you're pissed off that the other guy is saying some political stuff that you don't like, you probably don't have any capacity to shut them up. And if you say, hey, listen, if you can't shop at my shoe shop if you don't say things that I agree with, then he goes, okay, cool. I'm just going to the next cobbler down. No big deal. But it's a much bigger deal now that we have these massive internet companies, especially because if you're living, say, in a small town, you might have all of one internet company. And if that internet company decides to kick you off the street or off their service, then suddenly your ability to communicate has gone way down. And so corporations are actually getting to the point where they rival governments in terms of how much they're able to exert control. But the flip side of that is like, I have a Discord that is closed right now. I'm probably going to switch it over to sort of being a subscriber benefit at some point. But my Discord is not a place of unfettered free speech. And similarly, my comment section. There's stuff that I've yanked out of my comment section because I've been like, no. Um, you know, and that's just because I participate on my Discord. I talk to people there. And so I want it to be a place where I don't hate being. I want it to be a space that I can live with. So I moderate the content. And, we need that ability to moderate. People point to Section 230 and say, oh, well, this, allows them too much power to moderate. Well, the reason why they have power to moderate is because you really want these platforms to be able to moderate, to say things like, hey, we're going to take down, bad touch to children material. We'll see if that gets me demonetized here. So, it's a real difficult situation for how to navigate. And I don't like how the Liberal Party is planning on doing it. That'll probably be its own other video. Just to cover a couple of super chats that came in. I need to figure out a system for actually saving them until I respond to them. YouTube doesn't do that very well. X, thank you for the $5. Learned about you through Racket/Rittenhouse. Subscribed for a while now. Just wanted to say, appreciate all you're doing, man. Thank you. I will drink to that. And I gotta say, doing the Rittenhouse trial is some of the most fun I've had, period. It is fantastic. I kind of wish it was possible to do that with a Canadian law case because we don't televise our cases. So I actually think that somebody said you're demonetized ages ago, hun. You're probably right. I don't think that we actually have I think the Canadians are actually at a loss. There's a drawback here as to, we can't watch our trials. We can't, there is no way to do that unless you actually go to the courthouse. And then we can't, I can't do a live commentary where I say, oh, look, this witness just screwed themselves on cross. I can't do that with a Canadian case, and it kind of makes me sad because I think that it is actually, I think that it's beneficial. And the other thing I think is that lots of people were watching on, Rakita's stream and came away from that with a much better understanding of what Canadian law, or what, not Canadian law, what the Rittenhouse trial was about and what the evidence was, because the media was not always being fair to the actual facts. And, there's a lot of people, for instance, who, didn't realize that there was a gunshot in the vicinity before Rittenhouse opened fire. There's a lot of people who didn't realize just how close that they were or what Rosenbaum was doing. And these things I think are really, really important to know. And also just to see like the conduct of counsel, because, I don't think that Rittenhouse's team did a flawless job, but they did a pretty good job. And I say that because at the end of the day, they got the ball over the line, right? They won. That's so they did a pretty good job, and they had access to the jury studies and so forth, which I didn't. But there were some things I thought they, could have done better. But the prosecution was. I do not like. I don't like Binger. I don't like Kraus. I think that the stuff that they did is terrible, and yeah. So, M. Terrence says $10. I couldn't blame you if you don't want to touch this, but will you have any commentary on the potential CPC leadership candidates and their gun platforms when they become available? I probably will. I try to avoid politics to a certain extent, but I mean, this matters to Canadian gun owners. And Nick, thank you for the $10. What are the laws regarding intoxication? Does blood alcohol have to be zero to handle? I assume this is firearms. What about having wine with dinner after a day at the range? Then later that night you were cleaning your firearms. The key thing on this one is going to be, is your behavior careless under the circumstances? So, like, if you have one beer, you're probably, for most of us, still good, right? Still good enough to handle a firearm. But if you're, and I mean handle in the sense of like cleaning, etc. But if you're starting to get into like 4 or 5 beers, put the guns away. You don't want to be sitting there about, you don't want it to be a situation where you're too drunk to handle them properly. Any amount of alcohol that you've had, if there's an incident with the firearms, like if you're sitting there cleaning a firearm and you've forgotten to clear it and it goes off, whatever you've been drinking that is more than stone cold sober will get looked at. So the best policy is 0. But yeah, somebody says work with Viva and other Canadian lawyers to get that changed. The media has been trying to get that changed for a long time without luck. I'll probably try. I'll probably take a swing at seeing if I can get the court to agree to televise something, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in it. Somebody says, any update on Bill C-21 with respect to owning and operating pellet guns? I own several that aren't exactly stored securely. My pistol's at lockable box unlocked, but not my rifle. Right now, C-21, in terms of pellet guns and so forth, nothing's changed in terms of the storage, which is simply not careless. Somebody's asking if I know about the direction of somebody who knows BC mining law. I don't know offhand. Actually, my dad used to do some prospecting, so I may have to talk to him. And but I can ask around, I guess, but I don't know anything offhand there. And just I don't know who is out at the one range, and I'm not going to name it, but apparently my dad has joined a range, and he's getting a lot of people commenting on the fact that he's my dad because we share a last name. So hi, if you're at that range. So yeah, it's that's interesting. I'm getting to hear about his experiences on that one. I don't know anything about prospecting. It seems really interesting, but it seems to require a degree of knowledge that I just don't know and don't understand. And yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll sort of wind things down here a little bit, or get towards winding down. I'm working on a video on these 2 guys who have been charged with a bunch of fish and wildlife offenses and related to the 30-day survival. That I don't know when that'll be coming out, but that'll come out when it can. As I said, a more fulsome discussion of Kotanko. I want to bring that out. I want to discuss that once we actually have what is it? Once we actually have the information to obtain, I want to get that lined up. There's a case that actually just recently said that the mandatory minimum sentence for manslaughter with a firearm is unconstitutional. And so I want to cover that one as well. Somebody's asking about the FRAS armor system, or FRAS. I don't know about that one. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to send me one, I'd check it out. But yeah, somebody's asking, is that Greg Ovens? That is indeed Greg Ovens and Zachary Fowler are those two guys who got charged. They're facing charges including keeping fish that they weren't supposed to, eating an endangered plant, cutting down trees in a national park, and operation of a drone in a national park without a license. So yeah. Now I see Thomas Gordon saying that the government website for applications is not available at this time for applying for a PAL. That's a hell of a thing. Let me know. My email address, runkleofthebailey@gmail.com. Shoot me an email about that, because I'm real curious about that. And hello to the Greater Toronto Pink Pistols. As I've said before, I support your guys' existence. I support the organization. I did an interview with them in the past, so you can check that out on the channel. CNR Arsenal, thank you for the $10 and $10 in freedom dollars. Keep it up, bud. Let us know if you ever need anything. So far, I'm doing all right, but I will keep people posted. I try not to. This is kind of a weird thing, because I try not to be the influencer douchebag out there, and I know that every business out there has had to deal with, the influencer douchebag going, hey, please send me free shit. And I try not to be that guy. I walked into a small town gun store here in Alberta, and, little tiny gun shop just along the road. And the guy was trying to give me my ammo purchase for nothing. And I was going, no, I will pay for this, please. This is a tiny little shop. I don't know how much business you get here, but take my money. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes people ask me to review things, and I'm like, that's like a $4,000 item, folks. We'll have to see. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out how to navigate that sphere of what to do about that. I did take a flashlight and do a flashlight review. I haven't done anything with that flashlight, which I guess tells you how much I think of that one. But yeah, that's something I gotta navigate. Phil Harrington is asking any update on Kotenko. As I said before, we're getting the information to obtain. It's sketchy. I did talk about it previously, so you're gonna want to go back and watch this over again. And yeah, Frank Merkel saying I never heard anything about it. Greg Ovens has been charged under the Canadian Parks Act. They charged him with a whole bunch of stuff, and it's yeah. So it's a really interesting thing, and I'm going to do a video on it because I think it is a bit of a cautionary tale for lots of people. I actually thought about I thought I was going to be a lot harsher on him than I will be in the video. I'll say that. But it is still a bit of a cautionary tale. And thank you for the $5. Squeak von Mausenmeyer says, my crossbow has a 6-bolt magazine, 130-pound throwing arm, no PAL needed. Highly recommend. I'm in Grand Prairie if you ever want to see it. I know a tattoo artist. He's a friend of mine up in Grand Prairie, so I may have to make a trip out there. I'm curious as to what that crossbow is, and which model that is. There's a whole bunch of stuff I want to. There's a whole bunch of stuff I want to do. I'm behind on all of it. One of the questions that keeps coming up is one I just saw in the chat here, saying, do you think there'll be an extension to the amnesty with respect to the Order in Council? That is something I really don't know about right now. It's kind of terrifying because we're coming up on this deadline and they haven't announced a damn thing about what they plan to do. They've been promising a buyback since forever, but there's no movement on that. And, I mean, the question's going to be like, why, what, nobody's going to hand anything in prior to a buyback right now because they've been promising the buyback and saying don't turn it in. And yeah, it's difficult. Somebody's asking, why am I not at the Great Honkening? Well, because it's in Ottawa and I'm in Edmonton, and that's a long way. Uh, that's a long way away from me, and I got obligations. I can't just pack up and leave. So yeah. Steve C, thank you for the $20. Says Logolus, never caught you live. Lunch on me. Well, thank you for the thank you for that. And yeah, I'm never gonna shed the Logolus name unless I cut my hair. And there's too many people that I've gotten a few really interesting bits of hate mail over the hair, so I will probably just keep it going for a while just to really tick them off. Uh, that's I'm an ornery cur, so yeah. All right, we've been going here for I think just a little over an hour. I'm gonna probably wind this up here. I'm gonna try to do more live streams in future. This is kind of an unusual format for me. It's new, it's different. I'm still learning how to do it. But yeah, that's kind of the plan here. I don't know how often because I mean it's just tough to plan out here. I see Squeak von Mausenmeyer. Thank you again for the $5. Cobra Adder, the R9 is 90 pounds. There's two different throwing arms commercially available. I turned two 90 pounds into a 180 pound. Go Gun is the site to see it. I'll have to check that out because that actually sounds really cool. All right. I see people saying do not cut the hair. So yeah, thank you for joining me. This is kind of a fun format. I'm gonna see as well. I want to see about experimenting about trying to bring some people on, including some Canadian lawyers, just to chat about things. Because there's a whole like I do, I'm good at my sort of certain area of things. There's other people who do some other stuff. I want to sort of do some interviews if I can, but we'll see. I got into YouTube by accident. I made my first video in order to convince somebody that I am terrible at this and shouldn't make any more videos, but that didn't work out. Turns out I was wrong, but I'm still learning what I'm doing here, and I mean, just the other day I figured out how to do something in editing, and yeah, I'm still learning a lot of this. I get comments about, hey, you should fix your lighting, and I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for bearing with me. I really do appreciate it, and yeah, I also should probably work on getting some intro and outro music. Nick's got that fantastic. I love that drinking song that he's got, but I should figure out something for signing out. But till then, I will wish you guys a good day and see you next time.